I'm Amber Hayes, 28, and last summer when Daniel proposed on the beach at Cape Cod, I thought I was finally getting my happy ending. Since I was a little girl, my parents promised me a $60,000 wedding fund for my special day. But last month, I discovered they gave every cent to my younger sister Madison for a down payment on her dream home instead. When I protested, they called me selfish and materialistic. The family I once trusted has completely fallen apart. Before I dive into how my family's betrayal unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama stories resonate with you. Trust me, this one's a roller coaster. ## Part 2, Background and Family Context. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I was always the responsible one. As the firstborn child, I took my role seriously, making good grades, following rules, and setting an example for my younger sister Madison. 3 years my junior, Madison was the spontaneous one, the social butterfly who charmed everyone she met. While I was studying for AP exams, she was being crowned prom queen. While I worked part-time jobs throughout high school, she was the star of every school play. Our parents, Thomas and Catherine Hayes, were pillars of the community. Dad worked as a bank manager, and Mom taught second grade at the local elementary school. They valued traditional milestones, especially marriage. From the time I was old enough to understand, they talked about my future wedding day. "We're putting away money every month for your wedding," Mom would say while we watched bride shows on TV. "By the time you find the right man, you'll have everything you need for a beautiful celebration." The wedding fund became a constant reference point in our household. When I wanted expensive jeans in high school, Mom would remind me, "We could put that money toward your wedding instead." When I got my first credit card, Dad lectured me about financial responsibility, ending with, "We're being disciplined about saving for your special day, and you should learn from our example." I took their lessons to heart. While many of my friends took out massive student loans, I applied for every scholarship available and worked 30 hours a week at the campus bookstore. I graduated with minimal debt and landed a marketing position at a respected firm in Boston. By 28, I had worked my way up to marketing executive with a comfortable salary, a modest but growing retirement fund, and an emergency savings account. Then I met Daniel Turner at a friend's housewarming party 3 years ago. He was tall with kind eyes and a quick laugh, a software engineer who was passionate about his work but maintained a healthy work-life balance. Our first date stretched from coffee to dinner to late-night dessert because we couldn't stop talking. With Daniel, I felt completely myself, no need to be the perfect daughter or responsible sister. Just Amber. After 2 years of dating, we moved in together in a small but cozy apartment in Cambridge. We talked about marriage casually at first, then more seriously as our relationship deepened. Daniel knew about my parents' wedding fund, though I never mentioned the exact amount. "Your parents seem very traditional," he said once. "I should probably ask your dad's permission before proposing, right?" I laughed but nodded. "He'd appreciate that. They've been looking forward to my wedding since I was born." Last summer, Daniel suggested a weekend getaway to Cape Cod. We walked along the shore at sunset when he suddenly dropped to one knee, presenting a sapphire ring that caught the last golden rays of sunlight. "Amber Hayes," he said, voice shaking slightly, "you're the most amazing woman I've ever known. Will you marry me?" I said yes immediately, tears streaming down my face. That night, we called our families with the news. My parents seemed genuinely happy, congratulating us and inviting us for dinner the following weekend to celebrate. During that celebration dinner, Mom toasted to our happiness, raising her glass with misty eyes. "We've been waiting for this day," she said. Our firstborn finding her perfect match. Daniel and I began discussing wedding plans on the drive home. We thought a spring ceremony would be perfect, not too hot, not too cold, with beautiful blooming flowers. We imagined about 150 guests, a charming venue, good food, and a live band. With my parents' promised contribution and what Daniel and I could save over the next year, we thought we could have the wedding of our dreams without going into debt. Over the next few months, I browsed venues online, collected dress ideas on Pinterest, and researched photographers. I didn't want to make any concrete plans without discussing the budget with my parents first, but I was excited to start the process. Then came the first warning sign. During a casual Sunday call with Mom, I mentioned a historic mansion I'd found that would be perfect for both ceremony and reception. "It sounds lovely, honey," she said, her voice tight. "But don't count on that full amount we've talked about. Things are more expensive these days." I brushed it off as Mom being Mom, always cautious about money. Still, I decided it was time to have a concrete conversation about the wedding fund. I texted my parents and suggested dinner at their house the following Friday to discuss wedding plans and finances. "Looking forward to it," Dad texted back. "Lots to talk about." I had no idea just how much there would be to discuss, or how dramatically my relationship with my family was about to change. Friday evening arrived with unusual September warmth lingering in the air. Daniel had a work commitment, so I drove to my parents' suburban home alone, excited to finally start making concrete wedding plans. Mom had texted that she was making my favorite, her special lasagna with garlic bread, which only added to my anticipation. When I arrived, the house seemed oddly quiet. Mom greeted me at the door with a quick hug, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Come in, honey. Dad's in the living room." I noticed immediately that the dining room table was set for 4, not 3. "Is someone else joining us?" I asked, hanging my purse on the coat rack by the door. Mom busied herself with adjusting already perfectly aligned silverware. "Madison said she might stop by. She has some news." My stomach tightened slightly. Madison's news typically commanded all attention in the room. Still, I reminded myself that tonight was about my wedding plans. I'd waited patiently for months to have this conversation. Dad stood when I entered the living room, giving me a hug that felt stiffer than usual. He offered me a glass of wine, which I accepted, noting that he poured himself a much larger portion than normal. "How's work?" he asked, his usual opening question. "Busy but good. We just landed the Peterson account, which is huge for the agency." "That's my girl," he said, but his proud smile seemed forced. The doorbell rang before the awkward small talk could continue. Madison burst through the door like a gust of wind, all energy and excitement. She was followed by her boyfriend Tyler, who she'd been dating for just over a year. Tyler worked in real estate development, a career he'd fallen into after dropping out of 3 different college programs. He was charming in that salesperson way, always ready with a compliment or a firm handshake. "Sorry we're late," Madison announced, though no specific arrival time had been set. Traffic was insane. Plus, we were dealing with some amazing news and lost track of time. Mom ushered everyone to the dining room, where the lasagna steamed in the center of the table. As we took our seats, Madison couldn't contain herself. "We found it," she squealed, grabbing Tyler's hand. "Our absolute dream home. It's in that new development in Lexington," Tyler added. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, open concept living space, and a yard big enough for kids someday. "Sounds expensive," I said, trying to keep my tone light while wondering why this announcement couldn't wait for another night. Madison's smile widened. "It is. But Mom and Dad made it possible with their incredible generosity." The room seemed to tilt slightly as Madison continued gushing. "I still can't believe you guys did this for us," she said, looking at our parents with adoration. $60,000 for the down payment. We never could have qualified for the mortgage without you. $60,000. The exact amount of my wedding fund. The fund my parents had been promising me since childhood. The fund we were supposed to be discussing tonight. My hands went cold. The lasagna I'd just taken a bite of turned to ash in my mouth. "What?" The word came out barely audible. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes, suddenly very interested in folding her napkin. Dad cleared his throat. "We were going to discuss this with you tonight," he said, his banker voice taking over, the one he used when explaining difficult financial concepts to customers. "We've decided to reallocate the money we've been saving." "Reallocate?" I repeated, still struggling to process what was happening. You mean the wedding fund? My wedding fund? Madison's excitement dimmed as she glanced between us. Wait, what wedding fund? The one they've been promising me since I was 10 years old, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. The one they reminded me about every birthday, every Christmas, every major life event. The one I came here specifically to discuss tonight. Dad set down his fork with deliberate precision. Amber, we had to make a practical decision. Madison and Tyler found the perfect starter home, but they needed help with the down payment. And my wedding isn't practical? My voice cracked. Mom finally looked up. Honey, you have a good job. Daniel has a good job. You're both established. Madison needs this more than you need an expensive party. An expensive party? I echoed, disbelief washing over me. That's what you think my wedding is? That's not what she meant, Dad interjected. But you have to admit, a house is an investment. A wedding is one day. Madison was looking increasingly uncomfortable. I didn't know. I mean, they never said the money was already promised to you. Tyler, ever the salesman, tried to smooth things over. Maybe we can find a way for your parents to help with both. The housing market waits for no one, but weddings can be flexible, right? I looked at my parents, waiting for them to correct him, to explain that they would find a way to honor their promise to me while also helping Madison. Instead, Mom gave a small nod of agreement with Tyler. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I stood up so quickly my chair nearly toppled backward. So that's it? You've been promising me this money my entire life, and the minute Madison wants something, you just hand it all over to her without even discussing it with me first? Amber, please sit down, Dad said firmly. You're making a scene. A scene? I came here to discuss my wedding budget, and instead I find out you've given my entire fund to Madison for a house she probably won't even stay in for more than a few years. That's not fair, Madison protested. We love this house. And I didn't know about any promise to you. Mom reached for my hand, which I pulled away. Sweetie, you're overreacting. We can still help with your wedding, just not as much as we originally discussed. How much? I demanded. How much of the $60,000 is left for my wedding? The silence that followed was answer enough. I can't believe this, I whispered, grabbing my purse. You could have talked to me. You could have explained. Instead, you ambushed me and made me feel like I'm being unreasonable for expecting you to keep your promise. I walked out despite their calls to come back and discuss this rationally. In my car, I called Daniel, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. They gave it all to Madison, I sobbed as he answered. Every cent of my wedding fund. For a house with a guy she's only been dating for a year. Daniel was waiting outside our apartment when I arrived, his face concerned. He held me while I cried, not offering solutions or minimizing my feelings, just providing the safe space I desperately needed. We'll figure this out, he promised as we sat together on our couch. With or without their help. But the betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about realizing that the parents I thought I could count on had broken a lifelong promise without even the courtesy of a conversation. It was about seeing, with painful clarity, that Madison's wants would always come before my needs. The days following the disastrous dinner were filled with a suffocating silence. I expected immediate calls from my parents explaining themselves or apologizing, but my phone remained eerily quiet. I threw myself into work, avoiding wedding websites that now seemed to mock me with their perfect, expensive celebrations. 3 days after the dinner, Mom finally called while I was on my lunch break. Amber, we need to talk about Friday night, she began without preamble. Your father and I are very disappointed in how you handled the situation. I nearly choked on my sandwich. You're disappointed in me? You broke a promise you've been making my entire life, and you're disappointed that I was upset about it? We raised you to be more understanding, Mom continued as if I hadn't spoken. Madison and Tyler needed this money. The housing market is so competitive right now. If they didn't act quickly, they would have lost their dream home. And what about my dream wedding? The one you've been promising to help with since I was a child? Mom sighed heavily. Amber, you've always been so practical. I'm surprised you're being this materialistic about a single day. Marriage is about the commitment, not the party. This isn't about being materialistic, I argued, fighting to keep my voice down in the crowded cafe. This is about you breaking your word. This is about you treating Madison's wants as more important than your promise to me. Madison has always needed more support than you, Mom said, her voice taking on that familiar defensive tone she used whenever Madison's behavior was questioned. You've always been so independent. So I'm being punished for being responsible? No one is punishing you. We're just being realistic about who needs what in this family. The conversation ended with nothing resolved. That evening, an email from Dad appeared in my inbox with the subject line, Financial Realities. Inside was a clinical breakdown of why, in his opinion, supporting Madison's home purchase was the most financially sound decision for the family as a whole. Homeownership builds equity, he wrote. Your wedding, while important emotionally, is not a financial investment. As your mother mentioned, you and Daniel have established careers and can afford to fund your own celebration, perhaps on a more modest scale than originally envisioned. The email concluded with, "We hope you'll come to understand our decision and support your sister in this exciting new chapter of her life." There was no acknowledgement of the broken promise, no apology for the ambush at dinner, just a cold financial justification that completely dismissed my feelings. Later that night, a text from Madison popped up, "Hey sis, why aren't you responding to Mom and Dad? They're really upset. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. It's just a wedding. You can still have a nice one, just maybe not as extravagant? Tyler says we should all get together this weekend to clear the air. Let me know." Her obliviousness to the situation made my blood boil, but I didn't respond. Instead, I showed the messages to Daniel, who had been my rock throughout this ordeal. "They're trying to make you the problem," he observed, his arm around my shoulders as we sat on our couch. Classic gaslighting. Daniel and I spent that weekend recalculating our wedding budget, a depressing exercise that ended with the realization that we'd need to postpone our spring wedding to save more money or drastically scale back our plans. The venue I'd fallen in love with was definitely out of reach now. "Maybe we should just elope," I suggested half-heartedly as we stared at spreadsheets on Sunday afternoon. Daniel squeezed my hand. "If that's what you want, I'm game. But let's not make any decisions while you're still processing all this. Whatever we do, it should be because it's what we want, not because we feel forced into it." My best friend Rachel came over that evening, bringing wine and a sympathetic ear. When I finished recounting everything that had happened, she was practically vibrating with outrage. "That is the most messed up thing I've ever heard," she declared, pouring us each another glass. "They've been promising you this money for decades, and they just gave it all to Madison without even talking to you first? And then they have the nerve to call you materialistic for being upset? Oh hell no." Rachel's validation helped more than she knew. In the face of my family's unified front, I'd started to doubt myself, to wonder if I was overreacting. "You're not crazy for feeling betrayed," Rachel assured me. "Anyone would feel the same way." The following Tuesday, my parents showed up unannounced at our apartment. Daniel was working late, so I faced them alone in our small living room, the space suddenly feeling claustrophobic. "We thought it was time to talk in person," Dad said, declining my reflexive offer of coffee. "This silent treatment isn't solving anything." "Silent treatment?" I repeated incredulously. "I'm not giving you the silent treatment. I'm processing a massive betrayal and trying to figure out how to salvage my wedding plans now that the budget has been decimated." Mom clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "See, this is exactly the problem. You're being selfish and materialistic about this whole situation. We raised you better than this. How is it selfish to expect you to keep your promise?" I demanded. "You've been telling me about this wedding fund my entire life. I've made financial decisions based on that promise. And then you gave it all to Madison without even having the decency to talk to me first. Your sister needed it more, Dad stated flatly. Sometimes being a family means understanding when someone else's needs take priority. And when have my needs ever taken priority? The question slipped out before I could stop it, unleashing years of carefully suppressed resentment. When has anything I wanted ever come before what Madison wanted? My parents exchanged that look they always shared when they thought I was being unreasonable about my sister. We've always treated you both equally, Mom insisted. But Madison has always needed more guidance, more support. That's not equal treatment, I pointed out. That's you constantly prioritizing her over me because she's louder about her wants. I've spent my entire life being the responsible one, never asking for much, and the one time I count on you to follow through on something you promised, you bail on me for Madison. Again. Dad's face hardened. We always knew Madison would need more help in life. You're the capable one. You'll figure it out. Those words cut deeper than anything else. I was being punished for being responsible, for not creating enough drama, for not demanding constant attention like Madison did. I think you should leave, I said quietly. And I think we all need some space to figure out what our relationship looks like going forward. Don't be dramatic, Amber, Mom said, standing but making no move toward the door. We're family. We'll get past this. Not without some serious changes, I replied. Not without you acknowledging what you did and how it hurt me. They left without any such acknowledgement, convinced that I was the one being unreasonable. As I closed the door behind them, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted to get past this with my family. Not if it meant continuing to accept that my feelings and needs would always come second to Madison's. The weeks following my parents' visit were a blur of conflicting emotions. During the day, I maintained a professional facade at work, but evenings often found me cycling through anger, hurt, jealousy, and a profound sense of inadequacy. Why wasn't I worth keeping a promise to? What had I done wrong? Why did Madison always get everything she wanted while I was expected to settle for less? Daniel tried his best to support me, but even our relationship began to strain under the weight of my emotional turmoil. Our wedding plans stalled completely. Every time we tried to discuss scaled-back options, I ended up in tears, mourning not just the lost funds but the family support I'd always thought I could count on. Maybe we should take a break from wedding planning, Daniel suggested gently one evening after another tearful discussion. Give ourselves some time to regroup. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to argue, but inside I felt another small loss. Our engagement should have been a joyful time of planning and anticipation. Instead, it had become a minefield of financial stress and family drama. A month after the initial confrontation, we couldn't avoid family gatherings any longer. My cousin Jenna's baby shower brought us all together at my aunt's house, creating an awkward reunion in a public setting. I arrived determined to be civil, pasting on a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Madison was already there, the center of attention as usual, showing off photos of her new house on her phone. Mom stood proudly beside her, adding commentary about paint colors and furniture arrangements. The scene was so normal, so infuriatingly unchanged, that for a moment I wondered if I had imagined the whole wedding fun debacle. My Aunt Susan, Mom's sister, approached me with a knowing look. "How are you holding up?" she asked quietly, guiding me toward the kitchen under the pretense of helping with refreshments. "You heard?" She nodded. "Your mom mentioned there was some disagreement about financial help. Though I suspect her version differs from yours." I gave her the briefest summary, trying to keep my voice neutral. Aunt Susan's expression grew troubled. "That doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. Your mom has always had a blind spot when it comes to Madison. Even when we were kids, Catherine would give up things she wanted if someone else seemed to want them more. I think she sees herself in Madison and you and me, the practical, independent one who doesn't need as much." Her insight struck a chord. I'd never considered that the pattern might extend back to my mother's own childhood. "How do you deal with it?" I asked. "Knowing you're always expected to be the understanding one?" "Not always well," she admitted. But I've learned to be very clear about my boundaries and what I need. And I've accepted that there are some things Catherine will never understand about our relationship. The conversation with Aunt Susan provided a new perspective, but it didn't ease the sting when I overheard two of my cousins discussing how my parents had recently given Madison an additional $5,000 for new furniture, money that apparently wasn't in the budget when I'd asked if there was anything left for my wedding. That night, memories of childhood incidents flooded back as I tried to sleep. Madison getting a car for her 16th birthday while I had to save for my own, Madison's lavish graduation party compared to my modest dinner celebration, Madison's college tuition paid in full while I juggled scholarships and part-time jobs. Each incident on its own had seemed reasonable given our different circumstances and needs at the time, but collectively they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. The following week, I finally took Rachel's advice and scheduled an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Levine was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that I appreciated from our first session. "What you're describing is a common dynamic in families," she observed after I shared my story. "The responsible firstborn often receives less attention and support precisely because they prove they can handle things on their own. It's unfair, but it happens frequently." "So I'm being punished for being capable?" "Not punished, exactly. But your parents have created a system where your sister receives more because she asks for more, demands more, while you've been conditioned to ask for less and be satisfied with less. Your feelings of betrayal are completely valid. A promise was broken, and instead of acknowledging that hurt, your family is trying to make you feel unreasonable for expecting them to keep their word." The validation from a neutral third party loosened something in my chest. I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. I wasn't being materialistic for expecting my parents to honor a lifelong promise. That same evening, Madison posted photos on Instagram of her newly furnished living room, tagging our parents with a caption thanking them for their continued generosity and support. The furniture looked expensive, certainly not from the budget retailers Daniel and I frequented. Each heart and comment from family members felt like another small betrayal. The following Sunday, Dad added me to a group text with Mom and Madison to sort out this situation once and for all. What followed was a frustrating exchange where my attempts to explain my feelings were met with, "You're too focused on money instead of family," from Mom. "I would have helped with your wedding if the situations were reversed," from Madison, who had never in her life put someone else's needs before her own. "We're disappointed that you can't be happy for your sister's milestone," from Dad. When I pointed out that they had created this entire situation by breaking their promise to me, Dad responded by removing me from the group chat. That night, I had a nightmare about standing alone at the altar in an empty church, waiting for family members who never arrived because they were all at Madison's housewarming party instead. I woke up at 3 a.m., heart racing, and couldn't fall back asleep. The stress began affecting my work performance. After I fumbled a presentation to a key client, my boss Sarah called me into her office. "Is everything okay, Amber? You've seemed distracted lately. Not your usual focused self." I gave her a sanitized version of the family drama, embarrassed to be bringing personal problems into the workplace. To my surprise, Sarah was enormously sympathetic. "Family financial disputes are among the most painful conflicts there are," she said. "They're rarely just about money, they're about values, priorities, and feeling valued. Take some personal days if you need them. The Peterson account will still be here." I was grateful for her understanding but determined not to let my family's behavior impact my career. Instead, I channeled my frustration into late nights at the office, building the most comprehensive marketing plan we'd ever presented to the Peterson team. Daniel, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly concerned about my emotional state. "What if we just elope?" he suggested again one evening as I stared blankly at wedding budget spreadsheets. "We could take that trip to Costa Rica we've been talking about, find a beautiful beach, and just do it, just us." The idea held a certain appeal, escaping the family drama, avoiding the financial strain, focusing purely on our commitment to each other. But a small, stubborn part of me wasn't ready to give up on the wedding I'd always imagined. "Let me think about it," I said, closing my laptop. I just don't want to make a decision based on running away from this situation. 2 months after the initial confrontation, an ivory envelope arrived in the mail, an invitation to Madison and Tyler's housewarming party. The handwritten note inside, in Madison's loopy script, read, "Hope you and Daniel can make it. I miss my big sister. Let's put the money stuff behind us and celebrate this exciting new chapter." I stared at the invitation for a long time, emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to tear it up and send the pieces back to her. Another part recognized this as possibly the first step towards some kind of resolution. The question was whether I was ready to take that step, knowing that putting the money stuff behind us likely meant accepting what happened without any real acknowledgement of how deeply it had hurt me. After discussing it with Daniel and Dr. Levine, I decided to attend. Not because I was ready to forgive and forget, but because avoiding my family forever wasn't a sustainable solution. If there was any chance of salvaging these relationships, even if they would never be what I once thought they were, I needed to at least try. Just remember, Dr. Levine cautioned during our session that week, attending doesn't mean you have to pretend everything is fine. You can maintain your boundaries while still being present. With that advice in mind, I RSVP'd yes to the housewarming party, bracing myself for whatever family dynamics awaited me in the house that should have been, in part, my wedding celebration. The day of Madison's housewarming party arrived with perfect early autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunlight, and trees just beginning to hint at the colorful display to come. Daniel squeezed my hand as we walked up the driveway of the impressive Colonial in Lexington's newest development. "Remember, we can leave any time you want," he murmured. I nodded, adjusting the bottle of wine we'd brought as a gift. I'd deliberately chosen something nice but not extravagant, a small act of boundary setting that probably no one but me would notice. Madison answered the door with her trademark enthusiasm, hugging me as if nothing had happened between us. "You came. I'm so glad. Come in, come in. Let me give you the tour." The house was undeniably beautiful, open-concept main floor, gleaming hardwood, and high ceilings. Each room was already perfectly furnished and decorated, looking like something from a home design magazine. As Madison led us through, pointing out features and sharing plans for future improvements, I felt a complex mix of emotions: admiration for the lovely space, resentment over how it came to be, and an undercurrent of sadness for what the money could have helped create for Daniel and me. My parents arrived shortly after us, greeting me with cautious smiles that suggested they were relieved I'd come but uncertain of my mood. I returned their hug stiffly, maintaining the polite facade we'd all tacitly agreed to present to the extended family and friends filling the house. For the first hour, I managed to avoid any substantial conversation with my parents by circulating among other guests. Several relatives asked about wedding plans, forcing me to repeatedly explain that we were still figuring things out and taking our time with the details. Each time I gave this vague answer, I felt a fresh wave of frustration. Aunt Susan found me in a quiet moment, glass of wine in hand. "How are you holding up?" "Managing," I replied. "The house is beautiful." "Yes, your sister has always had expensive taste." She gave me a knowing look. "Have you and your parents had any productive conversations since we last talked?" I shook my head. "They're still convinced I'm being unreasonable. And Madison just wants everyone to move past it without actually addressing anything." "Typical," Aunt Susan sighed. "Your mother was the same way growing up. Conflict avoidance at all costs." Our conversation was interrupted when someone turned down the music and called for everyone's attention. Madison stood in the center of the living room, Tyler's arm around her waist, my parents beaming beside them. "We want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate our first home with us," Madison began, her voice carrying the practiced projection of someone used to being the center of attention. "Especially our amazing parents, who made this dream possible with their incredible generosity." Applause filled the room as my parents smiled modestly, accepting the appreciation with practiced humility. "We couldn't have done this without you," Madison continued, her eyes glistening with theatrical tears. "The down payment, the furniture budget, you've given us the perfect start to our life together." "Furniture budget?" I knew about the additional $5,000, but the way Madison phrased it suggested even more financial help beyond the initial $60,000. I glanced at Daniel, who raised his eyebrows slightly, clearly picking up on the same implication. As guests dispersed to refill drinks and return to conversations, I made my way to the kitchen for a moment alone. Through the pass-through window, I could see my parents and Madison still standing together, now joined by my mother's brother Uncle Jim. "The place looks fantastic," I heard him say. "That sectional must have cost a fortune." "We helped them furnish the main floor," my father replied. "Can't have them starting out with second-hand furniture like we did." My mother nodded agreement. "We've set aside another $10,000 for when they're ready to do the basement renovation. Tyler has plans for a home theater setup. Another $10,000. On top of the $60,000 down payment and the furniture money." While Daniel and I were struggling to rework our entire wedding budget, trimming guest lists and considering City Hall instead of the venue I'd fallen in love with, I didn't realize I'd made a sound until Daniel appeared beside me, concern etched on his face. "You okay?" "They're giving them another $10,000 for a basement renovation," I whispered, hands gripping the edge of the counter. "After the down payment. After the furniture money. Another $10,000. Before Daniel could respond, Madison entered the kitchen carrying empty wine glasses. "Oh good, you're both in here. Are you having fun? What do you think of the place?" She set the glasses down and turned to me with a bright smile. "I was just telling Cousin Beth about your wedding. She was surprised you're keeping it so simple and intimate." I told her it's totally your style to do something understated. Something in me snapped. All the hurt, resentment, and frustration of the past months crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. Intimate and understated wasn't my first choice, Madison. It's what I'm left with after Mom and Dad gave you my entire wedding fund. Madison's smile faltered. "Come on, Amber. Don't start this again. Not at my party." "Your party in your house that my wedding paid for," I replied, my voice rising despite my best efforts to control it. "The house with brand new furniture that my wedding also apparently paid for. And now I find out they're giving you another $10,000 for a basement renovation? While I'm trying to figure out if I can afford a photographer for my wedding?" By now, guests in the adjacent dining room had fallen silent, attention drawn to our increasingly heated exchange. My parents appeared in the doorway, Dad's face thunderous, Mom's anxious. "Amber, this is not the time or place," Dad warned. "When is the time?" I demanded. "When I've tried to talk to you about this, you dismiss me or tell me I'm being materialistic. You broke a promise you've been making my entire life, and none of you will even acknowledge it." Madison's eyes narrowed, her party hostess persona dropping away. "It's not my fault they decided to help me instead. Maybe if you hadn't been so stuck up and perfect all the time, always making me look bad, they wouldn't feel like they need to even things out now." Her words hung in the air, revealing a resentment I'd never fully recognized. In Madison's narrative, I realized she was the underdog and I was the favored daughter, a complete inversion of my own perception. "Even things out?" I repeated incredulously. "They've been evening things out in your favor our entire lives. The car they bought you while I saved for mine. The full college tuition they paid while I worked through school. Every time you needed or wanted something, they provided it, while I was expected to handle things myself because I was the responsible one." "That's not true," Mom interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is true," Aunt Susan said from the dining room doorway, surprising everyone. "Catherine, you've always given Madison whatever she wanted while expecting Amber to make do with less. We've all seen it for years." The room had gone completely silent now, guests frozen in place, witnessing family dynamics that had never been so publicly exposed. "You told me I was special," Madison said suddenly, turning to our parents. "You always said I needed extra support because I was special." Mom's face flushed. "Madison, that's not exactly." "You did say that," Dad admitted, looking uncomfortable. "But we didn't mean. You told me I was the special one?" Madison's voice rose in disbelief. "Well, you told Amber she was the responsible one?" Do you have any idea what that does to siblings? The conversation was spiraling in an unexpected direction, years of family dynamics unraveling in a very public setting. Guests began to awkwardly excuse themselves to the patio or front yard, giving us the illusion of privacy. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I deserved what you gave me, Madison continued, tears now flowing freely. Always feeling like I wasn't good enough on my own, that I needed your help to succeed. Meanwhile, you set Amber up to feel like she never deserved help, that asking for anything made her selfish. I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. She hadn't been plotting to steal my wedding fund, she'd been playing the role our parents had assigned her since childhood, just as I had been playing mine. We never meant to create this competition between you, Mom said, her voice small. We were just trying to give each of you what you needed. What about what we asked for? I challenged. What about the promises you made? I needed that wedding fund, not just the money, but the follow-through on something you'd been promising me forever. Daniel, who had been silently supportive beside me, finally spoke. With all due respect, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, you created this situation. You set your daughters against each other by treating them differently their whole lives, and then you broke a promise to Amber without any discussion or warning. You can't be surprised that it's blown up like this. My father's face reddened. You don't understand our family dynamics, Daniel. This is between us and our daughters. He's going to be your son-in-law, I pointed out. He is family. And he's right. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Tyler, who had been hovering uncertainly in the background, moved to Madison's side. Other guests had completely vacated the surrounding rooms, giving us a bubble of tense privacy in the midst of what was supposed to be a celebration. I can't do this anymore, I finally said, my voice steadier than I expected. I can't pretend everything is fine when it's not. I can't keep playing the role of the responsible daughter who never complains, never asks for anything, and always understands when Madison's needs come first. I looked at my sister, seeing both the familiar irritation and a new recognition in her eyes. And I'm sorry that our parents put you in the role of the special one who always needs rescuing. That's not fair to you either. Gathering my purse from the counter, I turned to Daniel. I'm ready to go. As we moved toward the front door, I heard my mother call my name, pleading. My father's voice overlapped, saying something about family loyalty and making scenes. Madison remained silent, Tyler's arm around her shoulders. Daniel and I walked to our car in silence, the perfect autumn day continuing around us as if nothing momentous had just occurred. As he started the engine, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, the terrible weight of the public confrontation, but also a strange lightness, as if speaking these long-buried truths had released something that had been suffocating me for years. Are you okay? Daniel asked as we pulled away from the curb. No, I answered honestly. But I think maybe, eventually, I will be. 2 weeks passed with no contact from my family. No calls from Mom, no texts from Madison, no emails from Dad, just silence. In the past, I would have been the one to reach out first, to smooth things over and restore family harmony at the expense of my own feelings. This time, I held firm in my decision to wait. Daniel and I sat at our kitchen table on a Saturday morning, coffee mugs between us, discussing our next steps. I've been thinking about us, about our wedding and our future, I began. I don't want my family drama to define our marriage before it even begins. Daniel reached across the table to take my hand. Whatever you want to do, I'm with you. If that means a courthouse ceremony next week or waiting a year to save for something bigger, I'm on board. I squeezed his hand gratefully. I think we need to reclaim this for ourselves. Not let my parents' broken promise or my family's dynamics determine what our wedding looks like. What are you thinking? I want to meet with a financial advisor, I said decisively. Figure out exactly what we can afford on our own, what timeline makes sense, and make a plan that doesn't depend on anyone else's money or approval. The following week, we met with Elaine Chen, a certified financial planner recommended by a colleague. She reviewed our finances, listened to our goals, and helped us create a realistic savings plan that would allow for a beautiful, meaningful wedding without financial strain. "You're actually in a better position than many couples I work with," Elaine observed. "You both have good incomes and minimal debt. If you're willing to push the date out another 8 months beyond your original plan, you could save enough for the venue you mentioned without compromising your emergency fund or retirement contributions." 8 more months wasn't ideal, but it was doable. And the thought of having a wedding that was truly ours, funded by us, planned by us, reflecting our values rather than family obligations, felt increasingly right. As we left Elaine's office with a concrete financial roadmap, I felt a sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced since before the wedding fund debacle began. That evening, I declined a call from my mother, sending a text instead. "I'm not ready to talk yet. Daniel and I are making our own wedding plans now. I'll reach out when I'm ready." It was the first time in my life I'd set such a clear boundary with my parents, and though it made my heart race with anxiety, it also felt necessary and long overdue. The following day, I drafted a longer email to both my parents. "I've had time to think about everything that's happened, and I want to be clear about where I stand. I was deeply hurt by your decision to give my wedding fund to Madison without discussing it with me first. More than the money itself, I'm hurt by the broken promise and by the way you dismissed my feelings afterward. I'm taking some time to focus on planning a wedding that Daniel and I can afford ourselves. We're adjusting our timeline and expectations, and I'm actually finding some peace in creating a celebration that reflects our values without depending on outside contributions. I'm not cutting you out of my life, but I am establishing new boundaries. I won't be available for family gatherings where my feelings and needs are dismissed or where Madison's wants are automatically prioritized over promises made to me. I need acknowledgement of the hurt caused and a commitment to more equitable family dynamics going forward. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk." I didn't expect an immediate response, and I didn't get one. What I did receive, 3 days later, was a surprising email from my Aunt Susan. "Amber, I've been thinking about you since Madison's housewarming. Several of us in the extended family were disturbed by what we learned about the wedding fund situation. We wanted to let you know we support you setting boundaries. Also, a few of us would like to contribute to your wedding fund, not to replace your parents' obligation, but because we want to support your marriage and we value you. No strings attached. Let me know if you'd be comfortable accepting our help." Her email was followed by messages from my Uncle Jim, my cousin Jenna, and even my grandmother, all expressing similar sentiments. I was moved to tears by their support and the validation it provided, confirmation that I wasn't overreacting or being unreasonable. After consulting with Daniel, I gratefully accepted their offers, though I insisted they should only contribute what they could truly afford. The financial support was helpful, but the emotional support was invaluable. A week later, I received a text from Madison asking if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. Cautiously, I agreed. We met at a neutral cafe halfway between our homes. Madison looked uncharacteristically subdued as she slid into the booth across from me. "Thanks for meeting me," she began, fidgeting with her napkin. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the housewarming." I waited, letting her gather her thoughts. "I didn't know about the wedding fund promise," she continued. "Not the specific amount, not how long they'd been promising it to you. I swear, Amber, if I'd known they were taking your wedding money for my house, I would never have accepted it." "Wouldn't you?" I couldn't help asking. "You've never had a problem accepting their help before, even when it meant I got less." Madison flinched but didn't deny it. "You're right. And that's part of what I've been thinking about. The things you said at the party, about me always getting what I want while you have to figure things out yourself, there's truth to that. I never saw it before because it was just normal. The way things always were." She took a sip of her latte, leaving a lipstick mark on the rim. "After you left, Tyler and I had a big fight. He said I was spoiled and entitled, that he was embarrassed by how I'd handled everything. We've been talking about it a lot since then, and he's helped me see some patterns I never noticed before." "Like what?" I was genuinely curious about her perspective. Like how I've always defined myself by what mom and dad give me. Like how I've never really had to work for anything because I always knew they'd bail me out. Like how I've never considered how their help to me might be affecting you. She met my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Amber. I really am. Her apology seemed sincere, if long overdue. We spent the next hour having the most honest conversation of our adult lives, unpacking the complicated dynamics that had shaped our relationship since childhood. For perhaps the first time, Madison listened more than she spoke, trying to understand my perspective rather than defending her own. I always felt like I was living in your shadow, she admitted. You were so good at everything, school, sports, being responsible. Mom and Dad were always praising you to their friends, talking about your achievements. I think they gave me things because it was easier than helping me develop the skills you had naturally. None of it came naturally, I corrected her. I worked incredibly hard because I learned early on that was the only way to get their approval. They praised me publicly but privately made it clear that being the responsible one meant I shouldn't need or want their help. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. The resentment hadn't disappeared entirely. Decades of established patterns don't change in a single conversation, but there was a new understanding, a tentative bridge being built. Would you? Madison hesitated as we stood to leave. Would you still want me to be a bridesmaid? When you and Daniel get married? The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and the thought of excluding her from such an important day felt wrong. Yes, I said finally. I would. But things need to be different going forward, Maddie. Really different. She nodded soberly. I know. I'm working on it. The following weekend, I sat down and wrote formal wedding invitations, including one addressed to my parents. I enclosed a note explaining our new plans, a spring wedding, now scheduled for the following year at a beautiful coastal venue within our budget. I was reclaiming not just our wedding but my sense of agency in my relationship with my family. Your presence would mean a lot to us, I wrote, but only if you can respect the boundaries I've outlined and acknowledge T. Our wedding day dawned with perfect weather, clear blue skies, gentle breezes, and spring flowers in full bloom along the Massachusetts coastline. The venue, a restored historic boathouse with panoramic ocean views, was more intimate than my original dream location but somehow felt exactly right for the celebration we'd created. In the bridal suite, Rachel helped adjust my veil while Madison carefully secured the something borrowed, Aunt Susan's pearl earrings, that completed my ensemble. You look beautiful, Madison said, her voice sincere. Our relationship had undergone a slow but steady healing over the past year. Weekly coffee dates had evolved into genuine conversations about our childhood, our parents, and the harmful patterns we were both working to break. The photographer's ready whenever you are, Rachel announced, checking her phone. And Daniel just sent a text that he's never been more ready for anything in his life. I took a final look in the mirror, hardly believing we'd made it to this day. The journey had been far from what I'd imagined, but in many ways, it had led to something better than my original vision. My parents had responded to my invitation with a lengthy letter that acknowledged, for the first time, the hurt they'd caused. They didn't offer to replace the wedding fund, and honestly, by then, I wouldn't have accepted it if they had, but they did express genuine remorse for breaking their promise and for the way they dismissed my feelings afterward. We never intended to create such different roles for you and Madison, they wrote, but we see now how our actions reinforced harmful patterns. We're trying to do better, and we hope you'll give us the chance to prove that. Their letter wasn't perfect, but it was a start. After several cautious phone conversations and 2 tense but productive family therapy sessions, suggested by Dr. Levine, I'd decided to include them in the wedding. Not in the traditional roles I'd once envisioned. Dad wasn't walking me down the aisle, and Mom hadn't been involved in the planning process, but as guests who had earned their place through difficult but necessary growth. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Aunt Susan peeked in, her eyes widening appreciatively at the sight of me in my dress. Your parents just arrived, she said. They're being very respectful, keeping a low profile. Your mom looks nervous. I nodded, surprising myself with how calm I felt. Tell them I'll see them at the ceremony. The wedding we created was nothing like the lavish affair I'd once imagined, but it was perfect in its authenticity. 60 of our closest friends and supportive family members gathered to witness our vows. Daniel's brother served as his best man, while Rachel stood beside me as maid of honor, with Madison and my cousin Jenna as bridesmaids. We wrote our own vows, promising not just love and fidelity but also true partnership, the kind where both people's needs matter equally, where promises are kept, and where difficult conversations are had with honesty and respect. As we exchanged rings, I caught sight of my parents in the third row. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue while Dad sat straight-backed but attentive. They'd honored my boundaries, arriving as invited guests rather than assuming the traditional parental roles. It was a small but significant indication that perhaps real change was possible. The reception that followed was filled with laughter, dancing, and surprisingly little family tension. Our friends had pooled resources to hire an amazing local band, and the dance floor stayed packed all evening. The cocktail hour featured a signature drink named the Reclamation, a playful nod to the journey that had brought us here. The most unexpected moment came during dinner when my father approached our table, looking uncharacteristically humble. "May I speak with you both for a moment?" he asked quietly. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table as we followed Dad to a quiet corner of the venue. "Your mother and I wanted to give you this," he said, handing me an envelope. "It's not about the money, but we hope it might help with your honeymoon plans." Inside was a thoughtful card and a check, not for the full $60,000, but for a generous amount that would indeed enhance our planned trip to Costa Rica. "We've been doing a lot of thinking since your email last year," Dad continued, his usual authoritative tone replaced by something more reflective. "The family therapist helped us see some patterns we'd never recognized. We're trying to do better, with both you and Madison." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "Not just for this, but for being here on our terms. For respecting the boundaries we set." Dad nodded, emotion briefly crossing his face before he composed himself. "You're a remarkable woman, Amber. You deserved better from us, and I'm sorry it took this situation for us to see that. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, too much had happened for that, but it was a meaningful acknowledgement, one that helped me enjoy the rest of our celebration with a lighter heart." After the wedding, Daniel and I spent 2 glorious weeks in Costa Rica, hiking through rainforests, relaxing on beaches, and building the foundation for our married life. We returned home to a small but growing gift fund from extended family members who had been moved by our story and wanted to contribute to our fresh start. 6 months after the wedding, we accepted Madison and Tyler's invitation to dinner at their home. The house that had once represented such betrayal and pain now felt like simply my sister's home, beautiful, but no longer a symbol of all that had gone wrong in our family. Over dinner, Madison shared that she and our parents had been working on establishing healthier boundaries of their own. They wanted to pay for our basement renovation, but Tyler and I decided to save up for it ourselves, she explained. "It's slower, but it feels better to do it on our own terms." "How did they take that?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Dad seemed almost proud, actually," Madison replied. "And Mom is learning, though she still tries to slip us little gifts sometimes. Old habits die hard, I guess." Speaking of Mom and Dad, Tyler interjected, "They mentioned they've been seeing that family therapist regularly. Your mom said it was your idea?" I nodded. After several individual sessions with Dr. Levine, I'd suggested that my parents might benefit from therapy of their own, not just for our family dynamics but for their understanding of themselves. To my surprise, they'd agreed. "It's helping them recognize patterns from their own childhoods," I explained. Mom's tendency to overgive to the needier child, Dad's rigid expectations, they didn't invent those behaviors. They inherited them. "Like we almost did," Madison observed thoughtfully. On the drive home, Daniel commented on how different things felt compared to a year ago. "If someone had told me during that housewarming blow-up that we'd be having a peaceful dinner there someday, I wouldn't have believed them," he said. "Me neither," I admitted. "But I'm glad we are. Not because everything's perfect now, but because we're all trying to do better. The truth was, the wedding fund betrayal had forced a necessary reckoning in our family. The painful process had revealed unhealthy dynamics that might otherwise have continued indefinitely, shaping not just our relationships but potentially those of the next generation as well. My parents still sometimes slipped into old patterns. Madison occasionally fell back on familiar behaviors when stressed. And I still had to consciously remind myself that having needs and expectations didn't make me selfish or unreasonable. But we were all more aware now, more intentional about the relationships we wanted to build. The true wealth in my life, I'd come to realize, wasn't measured in wedding funds or dream homes. It was found in relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care, the kind where promises matter, boundaries are honored, and love doesn't come with conditions or comparisons. As I look back on that tumultuous year now, I'm grateful not for the betrayal itself, but for the growth it ultimately inspired. Sometimes the most painful ruptures create space for the most meaningful healing. And sometimes reclaiming what's rightfully yours, your voice, your boundaries, your self-worth, is the greatest gift you can give yourself. If you've experienced family financial drama or betrayal, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you navigate it? What boundaries did you establish? Also, if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more authentic family journey stories. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how much others are willing to give you, financially or emotionally. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength in your own journey of setting healthy boundaries and claiming the respect you deserve.